There we go. Let's go. Okay. I think we're ready to start here. It looks relatively full. Can you guys hear me okay? All right. I am going to spend the next 20 or 30 minutes talking to you about fun in the classroom. Somehow someone tagged online into that, which seems even more complicated, but we'll see what we can accomplish. And since it's a forest theme, the title's rocks. Okay, so who and what? A lot of you probably know who I am. A lot of you are probably already tired of hearing from me, but I'm the Director of Academic Tech at CU Online. So I run the CU Online operation. I teach online, I teach in the classroom, so all of this is really near and dear to my heart. But what you probably don't know about me, which is probably even more important when it comes to talking about fun, you probably didn't know that I was once an attraction at the Denver County Fair. Ask a 50-year-old, old enough to know better, young enough to keep trying. I stood in this booth for 2 days and talked to people. My wife always says, how can you be the professor of fun? You never have any fun. I say, I don't like to have fun. I just like to talk about it. But and this summer, I'm teaching the architecture of fun. So I really do put my money where my mouth is when it comes to talking about fun. I talk a lot about fun in the business workplace because it turns out business people are very, very interested in fun. But I thought it was time for me to turn my lens of fun toward the classroom. So what I want to do is I kind of want to walk you through the basic idea here and let you do a little bit of work yourselves to come up with some ways of maybe having a little more fun in the classroom. Maybe we'll get to the online classroom. Okay, so question. What are these people doing? Just shout it out.
They're at a haunted house.
They're at a haunted house. So what are they doing? Or what are these people doing? Safety in numbers. Yeah, they're looking at something terrifying. What are these guys doing? Okay, let me help you. They're having fun. Right? No argument here. No one made them do this. They probably paid $50 a person for the privilege of looking like this. So they're having fun, right? Okay, so terror, whatever. They're having fun. What are these people doing? Oh, you guys are getting good at this. They're playing a game. What one could observe, what they're actually doing is they're committing really high-level cognitive labor towards a competitive system. I mean, you know, they're really, this may take hours of intense management and focus to do this, but they're having fun. What are these people doing? Having fun, right. Actually, what they're doing is they're looking at water. They are looking at water, but nobody has any problem with saying they're having fun. All right, one more. What are these guys doing?
Building testosterone.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you they're having fun in case you can't tell. This is called the Penzic Wars. Anyone ever heard of this? About like almost 50,000 people show up for a week of faux medievalism. Then it's kind of the highlight of these massive battles, right? Have you ever heard of Society for Creative Anachronism? Same kind of idea. So these are just, normal people that, dress up and commit this enormous amount of energy and physical effort and probably pain, all in the name of having fun, okay? Got another one for you. What are these people doing? Yeah, they're not having fun. So with that in mind, I think we have a bit of a question to answer. Why is terror, intellectual labor, looking at water, and just physical effort more fun than sitting in a classroom, listening to a lecture? Why is that? I mean, that's just sort of the central question. Well, the good news is I have an answer. And you may not believe me, but I have an answer, so I'm ahead of the game. Let me give you two words that you thought you would never hear put together, fun and theory. But yes, in fact, there is fun theory. And I love getting to talk to a higher ed audience because you know what comes next. I'm going to give you the theory, right? So class, let's just go through it real quickly. Usually I spend 15 weeks on this, but we can do it in about 5 minutes. An easy way to think about what fun is to look at some of the work or this paper that this guy, Gregory Bateson, wrote a bunch of years ago. And Some of you are probably familiar with Bateson. He floats across so many disciplines. He may be an anthropologist. He may be a sociologist. Maybe he's a linguist. We're not sure. He kind of did it all. But one day he has this question. He's like, do animals have metacommunication? Communication about communication. Or as I like to say, when my wife says, I don't like your tone, she's committing metacommunication, communication about communication. Well, Bateson wants to know, do animals have metacommunication? So, like any good observational scientist, he goes to the zoo and he starts watching the monkeys do whatever the monkeys are doing. And they're fighting and they're wrestling around, and they're biting each other, but he realizes they're not actually in fight mode. They're playing. And see, being Bateson, he went, oh, like, holy shit, they're playing. They have metacommunication, right? Because they're saying, I'm enacting these things that are, like, violent, but they're not really violent. Or he called it the bite that's not a bite. So the monkeys would bite each other, but they weren't real bites. They were bites that were meant to connotate what a bite means, and it's so wonderfully nested. But the real point was, they were saying, I'm biting you, but I'm biting you in such a way that it's not a real bite, so it's the bite that's not a bite. And you put it together, and he called this the genesis of play and fantasy. That's what he thought it was, that was all play. It's an easier way to just think about the bite that's not a bite, or I would just say that is not, as fun. All the things that we've been talking about actually have this all in common, which is they maintain this weird dual nature of something that is what it isn't and isn't what it is. And that's how you get the haunted house to work, right? Because a haunted house is real terror, right? I mean, there's real threat. Your body's responding to something really dangerous. But it's mitigated by the fact that fundamentally it's not dangerous. Nobody would pay, much less willingly go into an old building with an actual axe-wielding maniac. That wouldn't be fun, right? But as long as you know it's pretend, it's okay. So that's the is not. And so what you're going to find is this theory of fun works pretty well across any kind of thing that you might just naturally identify as fun. So let's go through some examples. I always find it's just easier for me to just rattle through just a bazillion different little examples real quick and just sort of show you, hey, there's the is not. Oh, there it is again. Oh, there it is again. There it is again. And if you're getting ahead, you're like, oh, we're going to apply this to learning. Yes, but not yet. Okay. Let's start with games. Games are great. Games are these little engines, these little systems in a box or in a video game, that really just generate these feelings that we would call fun, these experiences we'd call fun. But what are games? They're really these things that are what they're not and not what they are. So I like Monopoly, right? What is Monopoly on its surface? Well, it's a chance for you to take all of the money from your friends and family and drive them into poverty. That's a blast, right? If you did that in real life, it might be fun for you. It wouldn't be fun for them. But, it's in a game, it's fun. Money that's not money, property that's not property, bankruptcy that's not bankruptcy. Disneyland, as someone who comes from the architectural theory background, I love Disneyland. I think it's just a wonderful place. It's so interesting. The people that don't like Disneyland, what do they always say? They say, I don't like Disneyland because it's fake. And the people that love Disneyland are like, I know that. That's the point. If I thought that was a real castle or that was a real mouse, that would be bad. Disneyland is full of all kinds of these is not constructions. The Jungle Cruise, the River Cruise. Rivers don't go in a circle, friends. That's not a river. The mountain that's made out of plexiglass. Even Mickey Mouse, the mouse who's not a mouse, he has a house that's not a house. It just goes on and on and on. And so it's delightful as long as you can keep both things going at the same time. If you suddenly thought Disneyland was real, that would be terrifying. Okay, so in architecture, there's this thing called the Folly. This is a classic one. It's called the Long Island Duck. It was built to sell eggs, right? So it's a building that's not a building. It's sort of a billboard. It's still a building. It still works like a building, but it's not a building. And I don't know why it's a duck, because they sold chicken eggs, but you'll find this in architecture over and over again. These follies, they're sort of buildings that kind of deny their buildingness, but they're still buildings. They still function as buildings. Puzzles are another great one. What is a puzzle? Puzzle's bizarre. It's like, here's this thing that you just have to commit all this energy to, and the outcome is like what? Now you can put the puzzle back in the box, right? It's a very strange thing that, at work, puzzles aren't fun, but puzzles are perfectly fun at home. Fish tanks, one of my favorites. It's nature that's not nature. We take these animals out of nature, and then we rebuild our idea of nature, including sunken ships, treasure chests, whatever else. But there's sort of this like nature that's not nature construction. Toys are an easy one. Kids get toys. Anyone who has kids knows that kids don't believe their toys are real. I would always say, you don't buy a lawnmower like mom or dad has, or an oven like mom or dad has, to be real. The kid doesn't want the real oven, doesn't want the real lawnmower. They want to push the lawnmower behind the real parent with the real lawnmower. They want to cook in the fake oven while the parent cooks in the real oven, because kids get that connection. They want ovens that aren't ovens and lawnmowers that aren't lawnmowers and guns that aren't guns. They don't want the real thing. They get older than they do. That's a different story. But costumes are wonderful. Bacon and eggs that aren't bacon and eggs, right? Anything, it's just like Harry Potter that's not Harry Potter. And then finally, magic. There's an area I study a lot about. I like magic a lot. Magic is fantastic because the whole premise of magic is like, look, I'm doing something impossible. But you're like, but it's not impossible. I just saw you do it. But I know you don't have mystical cosmic powers, so it's some sort of a trick. But it's okay that you're tricking me because I'm allowing it. It just goes in, and it's over and over again. Things don't disappear in real life, but you just saw it disappear. So magic is absolutely, this reality that's not real. So that's a short course in the is not. Before we get into fun, I want to tell you a couple other quick things about fun. One is Gregory Bateson doesn't talk about fun. I just borrow part of his theory. But there's another guy, I don't think, is Michael Zinzer in here? I owe him a huge credit. He got me on this guy, Arthur Koestler. Some of you might know who he is. He was very famous in the 50s and 60s. But he wrote this book called Acts of Creation, and I won't go into it in great detail except to say Koestler said that humor, art, and science were all born of this thing that he called bisociation, or the bringing together of two planes of meaning not ordinarily connected. The reason that's important to his academics and his higher ed people and people who want to talk about learning is it's the same theory that Bateson had about play and fantasy, elaborated and showed some other things. He doesn't talk about fun either. I think it's because he was Hungarian. But again, you can apply it, but it's important to start to say, oh, this fun stuff has some benefit beyond just, it's enjoyable, right? I mean, it actually may be triggering the kind of playfulness from which creativity comes from, innovation comes from, motivation and engagement. We'll talk a little bit about that later. Oh, no, talk about it right now. This is the stuff that when I talk to business people, I say, you should have a more playful work environment because you don't have enough innovation, creativity, or motivation or engagement in your office. Play will bring that to bear. These are weird words for education. I don't have a good translated vocabulary for you. But you can imagine these wouldn't be bad things to add to your classroom, right? It would be good to have students very engaged and feeling creative about the material and thinking about how to use it and being motivated. So I'll just leave that to the side, but to say there is some theory to suggest there's more to play than just, pleasure. Okay. If that all kind of makes some sense, and I think let's put it to use and see what we can come up with. I just listed some of the core structures of education, right? Just the stuff that we do. We could go on and on and on, but these are some big ones. I don't think anybody in here has ever taught a class that didn't use any of these. It comes up somewhere. So the real question is, how do we make these things fun? Well, in a short period of time, I thought we would just focus on the lecture. I thought that would be easiest. Let's just focus on making the lecture more fun. And I'm going to get to that in a second because I want to kind of get you thinking about how to do this, and then we'll kind of see what ideas we come up with. But I figure if we can make the lecture more fun, that'd be a good start. But I want to show you this first. Let me just pop open this Vimeo real quick. CU Online is a pretty fun place. We're pretty playful. And so a few years ago, just to advertise one of our events, we made all these talks. And I want to show you what the team came up with. We fixed the MOOC, okay? So I want you to see this. You have a little inspiration. Here's how you fix the MOOC. And hopefully this will load here. All right. And I got to hack this because this doesn't quite want to work here. We've all heard about flipping the classroom. That's where you take your classroom lectures, you record them, and you have students watch the lectures as homework, and then when they come to class, use that time for meaningful discussion and educational development. I'm sure a lot of you have heard about MOOCs, massively open online courses. These are gigantic courses with 100,000 students all participating in a single class online taught by one talented faculty member. Well, welcome to the next revolution in learning. It's time
to flip the MOOC. Imagine, if you will, 100,000 teachers online teaching one student. Think about it.
So clearly we know no fear nor shame when it comes to coming up with new ideas. So with that as your inspiration, I would like to actually, I'm sorry, I got to get this back into present. I'm going to give you a quick framework for how we're going to solve the MOOC, or excuse me, how we're going to solve the problem of the classroom or the lecture that's not fun. And we're going to use a technique that's called reversing assumptions. And there's just tons of creativity, things out there, tons of books about it. I like this one because it's easy to do and it's pretty playful, and the outcomes are pretty good. I'm using a particular version of this that comes from this book, Cracking Creativity, and there's a really nice bit about this in this other book, The Medici Effect, so if you want to go read these things. But the idea is pretty simple. I mean, it's these three steps here. It's you think of something, so in this case, we think about the lecture, and you think about all the assumptions that you have about the lecture, and then you reverse those assumptions, just 180 degrees, and then you go through those reversals and you try to make them meaningful, or you try to actually put them into practice. Now, clearly, my flipping the MOOC thing is just funny because there's really not much you can do with that. But lecture we can do. So I got it started because I know we don't have tons of time. So I put some assumptions up here, and we can go through some more. But, assumption number one, lectures something you do in the classroom, right? I'm doing it right now to you. Lectures are boring. Again, I'm doing it right now to you. Lectures are structured, right? I mean, some of us kind of come from the background, you're not supposed to freewheel it. You should have notes. You should walk methodically through what you're talking about. Think about it. Professors deliver lectures. That tends to be kind of in our mindset. It's not always the case, but that's kind of an assumption. So what other kind of just assumptions do you have about the lecture? I mean, it don't have to be your assumptions. Just kind of things that we generally assume about the lecture.
You have to have a PowerPoint.
You have to have a PowerPoint, yes.
Passive learning.
It's passive.
Will this be on the exam?
Will this be on the exam? Yeah. Lectures need to be on the exam.
It has a definite beginning and end.
It has a beginning and an end. By the way, if you have some of these, you've got to remember them because I'm not writing them down so we can come back to them. They're unidirectional, right? They're delivered like this, right? You sit there, I stand up here, right? That's.
You provide the notes.
I provide the notes, okay. That's, really, I don't ever do that, but okay. That's an assumption. I want you to read what's on the screen, yeah. I want you should stay awake. What's that?
Write every word down.
You should write everything down. Okay, I want you looking at me all the time, and you don't have to read what's in the textbook if you come to lecture, right? You can do this. This is good. So now here's the fun part, right? We got to reverse all this stuff, right? So we can start up here. I just put this up to kind of get started. But those of you that already had an assumption, I want you to come back. I want to come back and hear your reversal. Lectures happen in the classroom. Lectures don't happen in the classroom. See how easy this is? Lectures are boring. Lectures are exciting. Lectures are structured. Lectures are unstructured. Professors deliver lectures. Professors don't deliver lectures, right? So what are some of the other assumptions? Reverse your assumptions. How would you say them?
Lectures can happen at any time.
Lectures can happen spontaneously at any time. Nothing in the lecture will be on the exam. Yes, yes. Students can lecture. Students lecture. Keep going here.
There's not a beginning and end.
Okay, so lectures don't have a beginning and an end, and students grade the exams. Or, yeah, okay.
You can only show pictures and videos on the screen.
Okay, you can't use words in your lecture. No PowerPoint. Okay.
The textbook's required because the students are giving the lecture.
The textbooks are required, yeah. I still like this. There's nothing will be on the quiz, will be in this lecture. So this is how you play the game, okay? So you just start with the first one, right? And then so we have to do the third step, make it meaningful. Lectures happen in the classroom. Lectures don't happen in the classroom. Oh, okay, we've seen this one before, right? Hey, class, it's nice outside, and I don't have a lecture prepared. Let's go sit outside. But do you notice, and I don't know who this fellow is, I just pulled it off the internet, but you notice every other idiom of the lecture is maintained, right? I mean, they're still sitting there. I had this great picture, this giant, there must have been 300 people splayed on this lawn, and there's someone standing there like this. So I'm kind of like, maybe we could do more with this. But now that's the question. So you kind of get the idea. Take some of these reversals, and I'm going to give you a couple minutes. You can talk to your neighbor. You can just mull it in your own mind. I want you to take, let's take 5 minutes. And I want you to take either one of the assumptions that you heard, one of the reversals you heard, and make it meaningful, or go through the process. But see what you can come up with, because if you can come up with something in the next 5 minutes to fix the lecture, there's hope to fix other things, okay? So you got 5 minutes, see what you can come up with.
Because it's boring.
It's okay.
I have to Zoom. Anyway, that's planning on my.
No, that's okay. Thanks for coming. All right, like one more minute. If I'm on there, one more minute. All right. Let's I gotta do this. Okay, let's try and see if we can't debrief this now. Exchange emails and phone numbers. You can continue this conversation. By the way, this is why you never, ever do this with your students. It's impossible to get everybody back together. I know, yeah, so. I hate to do this to you, but I want to hear what you're talking about. So, and plus, it's really boring to stand up here while you guys talk. It's the reverse of a lecture.
We were very intrigued by the comment about nothing in this lecture will be on the exam.
That's a winner, by the way. I think. Yeah.
And we said, what if the entire course was based on participation in the classroom and allowing the content to take care of itself?
Mm-hmm.
And so, and maybe ultimately a final project or presentation or something at the end, or maybe a beginning and an end of here's your baseline, here's your end, what did you think? But every session is about the participation piece, and you're guiding it, but there's no content-related exam.
Well,
I'll just say the other side of that we got into with our own probably box thinking about accreditation.
Mm-hmm.
Content, both of us come from disciplines where licensure is required at the end of the program, and how do you ensure that they're going to pass that test?
Right. Well, and that's why I put this diagram back up here, because as we kind of talk through this and debrief this, remember, the reversing the assumptions thing you're not supposed to destroy the lecture. I mean, the easy way to just get rid of the lecture is just stop doing it, right? But the is not, in order to get that play going, you've got to be able to maintain a lecture that's not a lecture. So you got to reverse the assumption. So what does a lecture look like that doesn't have any apparent grading, if that assumption's gone?
So we kept on that.
Okay.
So we like you, flipped it from a push model to a pull model. So we had the students kind of more getting more involved in what they think, what they thought they should be evaluated on. So if the professor, he or she kind of gave like a brief outline of what the lecture would be on, and then the students took that framework and then went and researched, talked to people or looked up stuff and said, what are the takeaways you really need to get out of this lecture? And then came back to the professor, and then the lecture would be a shorter, more abbreviated thing, because the students would be saying, I need to know that piece and that piece and that piece.
Students are deciding what they're telling what's on.
So you're basically saying you're going to have the students lecture.
No, they're going to decide what's on the exam.
What's on the exam, okay. So where's the lecture fit into this?
They have the framework, and then they're pulling, it's an abbreviated lecture because they're getting lecture pieces on exactly what they think they should.
So then I'm trying to follow you here. So this is like choose your own adventure lecture. Okay. See, that would be fun, right? Okay.
Based on, some reality. Of course, we're very realistic.
Well, I think the choose your own adventure lecture could be kind of an interesting, do you want to hear about cell mitosis or meiosis? Okay, we open the left door. So what else? What other, let's hear, what you got?
One question that came up in our discussion is that there's different interpretations of fun, like Disney.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you make a
Well, that's a whole other question. I would say it doesn't matter as long as it's entertaining to you, you know. But you'll bring everybody. You know, it's kind of like, you know, your mom doesn't want to go to Disneyland, but she enjoys it because the kids are having fun. You know, just bring everybody along. But I don't mean to be completely glib about that, but it's a whole nother question I cannot answer at the moment. So, what else? What assumption did you pick? Let's pick one. Pick an assumption that you want to reverse from what you're talking about it. I realize it's totally unfair to make you masters of fun in 15 minutes, but, you know, we're trying.
Well, we talked about the one-wayness, you know,
Okay.
unidirectional. And so, you know, we pause, we have them think their share, we have them come back as a group. And I was sharing with my group, I still think we're hard-pressed to call that fun. Like, we broken it up, we made them think, but I don't think they're feeling Disneyland was
Okay. Yeah. Let's take this. Lectures are unidirectional. So we're going to reverse the assumption and say lectures are bidirectional, okay? Well, that doesn't sound right because that would be dialogue or discussion. But what does that look like? How can you make a bidirectional lecture meaningful? How about if I'm going to do a lecture and you can raise your hand at any point in time and ask a question, right? Or actually, you can raise your hand at any point in time, but when you raise your hand, the lecture goes to you. And you got to stand up. I'm going to sit down, and you have to continue the lesson, right? And I'm still there. I'm still the teacher. If it gets weird, I can raise my hand and take control again. Would it work? I don't know. I mean, some of us teach sciences that have pretty established, you know, ontologies of how we like to teach things. Some of us come from, you know, more, you know, humanist discursive backgrounds. This sounds awesome. Maybe we actually would participate in a discussion like that. And so maybe that's too hard to have it be nominating. So you ever, you know, play the hot potato game, right? How about that? How about if you have some sort of a timer or something, and when you've got the timer, it goes off. You got to take over the lecture, and then, you know, you got to talk for 2 minutes and then throw it to the next person. Would it work? I have no idea. I've never tried it. Would it be fun? It would be more fun than listening to me talk for 50 minutes straight. I mean, I guarantee you that. Would it be pedagogically effective? I don't know. Maybe you'd have to put it on the exam and find out. The important thing here is, and I'm going to say somebody else has to get their brain going here. The important thing in this fun construction is not. It cannot be consumptive. If you see Disneyland as a machine designed to separate people from their money, it's not fun anymore. It is that. I mean, it's just, you can't really get away from it. But if it's also a fantastic place where you can rediscover your childhood, okay, you know, you get that distance. Here's the word that you know so well. It's the word play, right? We use the word play almost exclusively to mean child's play. But that's why we have that word child's play, because play means something else. Play, like in a mechanical system, means looseness. Not broken, just looseness. It's the play in that system. Some systems demand play. They need a play in there in order to work. Is not creates this weird thing in the middle, which is really uncomfortable to people who have been, you know, basically raised on this kind of empirical model that says boys, girls, black, white, you know, patriot, not patriot. But most of us understand, the world's kind of confusing. And when you get both of those things going together at the same time, when you get a mouse that's not a mouse, your brain has to actively fill the middle. And that's where the intellectual work happens. So play is important. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to create play. So I could have asked you, how do you make the lecture playful? That might have been an easier way to get you into it. But I'm trying to get you to think about this. When you design fun, you kind of have to design the contradiction in such a way that you do not consume the original thing. Because otherwise, we're just throwing the lecture away, right? If lectures are bad, throw them away. Stop using them. But if lectures have benefit, you just want to make them more playful. You want students to become more engaged in them, to be more motivated by them. Then create the is not construction. That's the idea. So does that kind of make a little more sense? You kind of have to do some of the labor initially just to even start to make sense. So with that said, does anybody have an assumption they'd like to reverse and try to make meaningful? You can do it at home too. It's free. So this is what I teach students. This is what I'm going to teach in the Architecture of Fun, is trying to get students to understand this is a part of their design language. And as people that basically are educational designers, I mean design courses, You have this tool available to you at all times. Your biggest barrier is probably the fact that you need to give yourself permission to play. And that's hard, especially if you're a rational scientist. Maybe you feel like that's inappropriate. But I'm telling you, it'll work for you. Let me show you one more thing here, and then we'll wrap it up right on time. And I got a deal for you. This is the best part of this whole talk. I got a deal. I'm trying to help people understand better how they can go about creating play. The is not a great design tool, but for some people it's too much. So I've kind of created these prompts, and these are prompts of there's different ways to kind of get yourself into the playful design mindset, and you don't have to write these down because that's my deal. Either you can email me, you can give me your business card, you can write your email down. I will send you this in more detailed form with some additional things. But this is a way to kind of help you think through. So this is your commitment. If you want to make your classroom online or otherwise more playful, you've got to pick something you're stuck on, and then you've got to create that play. You've got to create that is not. And so, like the first rule here, break and make, it just basically says, in order for you to make something playful, you may have to break it, right? You can't just say, we've always taught it this way, we will always teach it this way, there's no other way to do it. If you're committed to that, there's not any play in that, right? It's too certain. If you have accreditation standards and accreditors that are going to, skewer you if you move an inch off of something, well, I don't know, maybe you can't make it playful. So thinking about breaking stuff is really important. And then behind each one of these prompts, there's a power law, kind of like what's the underlying kind of, thing that makes that work. And it turns out that failure is a wonderful design tool. And those of you in the design disciplines know lots and lots and lots about iteration and failure and designing past failures and over again. There's a great quote from Elon Musk, of all people, the guy from Tesla and SpaceX. He says, if you're not failing often, you're not innovative enough, right? I mean, Tesla totally understands. You got to blow some rockets up before you put someone on the moon. So I'll send this to you, but they're all pretty much just kind of like they're prompts. Like if you're stuck, you can be like, can I break this? How can I play? How can I create imagination or wonder? How can I remix stuff? That's another kind of one of those great creativity exercises. Pull two things out of a hat and try to figure out how to make them work. And I can talk about this for weeks and weeks and weeks because this is my area of research and scholarship. All right, we got a few more minutes left here. Thoughts, comments, objections, questions?
Can you say just a little bit about number 7?
Number 7, allow the shallow. Yeah, this is a hard one because sometimes if you take everything super seriously, it's too earnest, right? You have to be able to back off of it and kind of be like, what if it doesn't matter, right? One of the examples that I use with in the business context is Salesforce. Salesforce this company is the fastest company to ever reach $1 billion in revenue. I mean, I don't know if you know Salesforce; it's huge, and their marketing brand is these cutesy cartoon characters, right? And like the first time I saw the salesperson that came with all these cartoons, I thought her toddler had gotten a hold of her laptop. I really did. That's what they look like. And then I realized, oh no, that's their cast of characters. They're these little cutesy, roundy, toddler-like characters. And Salesforce allows the shallow, right? They don't feel like we're $1 billion CRM company. Everything has to be gleaming, sharp edge, robot power. It's like, okay, we got these little cheerful characters that encourage you to, hey, we're nice guys, we're fun. And so there's a certain sense of kind of allowing the shallow, right? But again, you got to remember back to the is not construction. If it is in fact only shallow, then it's not fun anymore. It's just trivial. But when a big powerful company allows itself to be represented through a really playful little piece of its brand, it makes you gonna go, oh, like you can't engage with it, using your normal kinds of faculties. And again, I'm showing you this to kind of whet your appetite to the idea that there's a lot of ways into this. And I love these prompts because, if you read the powers, they're easier. The power of escape, the power of story, the power of combination. Those are, it turns out recombining things is a very powerful way to generate play, a.k.a. what we call fun. All right. One last question. Does anybody want to finish this lecture for me? Here's my contact information. Please send me an email, but I'm happy to send you the information and certainly engage in dialogue. And I guess the last little story I'll tell you is I met a environmental engineering professor up in Boulder, and he said, I need to make this more fun. Making junior faculty thinking through their career through the tenure and be less stressed about it. I'm like, okay, yeah, wow, that's thanks for such an easy assignment. And so, not only am I dealing with engineers, I'm dealing with this really high-stakes thing, pre-tenure faculty up at Boulder. And so, he and I kicked it around a little bit, and we came up with this little stock market game of thinking of your research career as a stock market. And it kind of had these rules and stuff. And, I don't know if it'll work for them, but it was a much more playful conversation about career than it would be if you're just like, I don't know, you better get a mentor. I don't know, you better be really lucky. I don't know, you better stay up really late and write a lot of grants. I mean, and all that's true, right? So some of the playfulness that we were able to bring in of like talking about career as stock market, it really ignited some interesting conversations. And so I know these kinds of tools work. And in that case, it was really just sort of using the power of imagination. I'm just kind of like, can you think of your career like it's a stock market game? Because then it allows you to get yourself out of it for a moment and reflect on what you're doing instead of just thinking it's me and my career. So, Normandy, yes.
Speaking of since you are not Mark Twain, I think it would be really funny to see Mark Twain.
Oh, I don't have the mustache. I can't do it. So, that's a link to a video. It's another Spring Symposium video for those of you who've been around a while. So, what? It's really long. So, how about this? All right, fine. I'm not shy. I just don't want to. I don't want the people that are like, don't click it. Oops.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mark Twain.
Thank you. I always said that golf was a fine Sunday afternoon walk ruined. I've also often said that e-learning is nothing more than learning with an E. That's difficult in these tremendous times that we call the information age for any unwashed schoolboy or prim school mom to not be swept away in the
And it goes on,
tide of change and excitement.
But there you go. Google for yourself, Innovations in Learning with Mark Twain. So, who here actually remembers seeing that at the symposium? What year was that? It was 2011. It was only 7 years ago. So, anyway, thank you for coming. Fill out the evaluation forms and stay in touch.